Well, good Monday evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bowling with the Fef, a platform for you to share your unique bowling story live on our YouTube channel. We have got a whale of a guest today. He is a former U.S. Open champion. He is a USBC Hall of Famer. He has set the 4-game televised PBA record for total pinfall, and he won a big collegiate tournament over the weekend with the team that he coaches, Tennessee Southern University. And we're going to get to all of that, including his bowling story, in just a few minutes. I did want to mention that EJ Tackett now has 2 of the first 3 PBA titles of the young 2023 season. He took the Shawnee Classic over the weekend. Now, along with his U.S. Open win to kick off the season, Tackett has 18 career titles, which puts him in a tie now for 14th all time with Nelson Burton Jr., Billy Hardwick, Dave Sutar, all Hall of Famers. The tour is in Wichita, Kansas this week. They will have the PTQ coming up tomorrow. Well, for the second consecutive year, as I've said a couple times on this show, I'm looking for some support for one-to-one youth mentoring in northwestern Wisconsin. Bowl for Kids' Sake is in our area this May, and I'm on a team called David Bowley, and that's the inspiration for the painted face picture that you see right there on your screen. The theme is Space Odyssey, and to support our cause, please head over to my donation page. You can see it right there, bit.ly/BFKSFEF2023. It is case sensitive, and thanks in advance for your support. Well, has anybody out there ever heard of tortilla cereal? I hadn't heard of it until today, but it's one of those things where you may have it and just not know what to call it. Tortilla cereal, as explained on Twitter by Wendy Hansen, is when none of the chips in the bag are big enough to eat with your hands. So you pour them into a bowl of salsa and eat it with a spoon. Like I said, not a term that I was familiar with before today, but I wanted to bring that up because in case any of you are big on tortilla cereal, the milk in the cereal better be Chip Magnet salsa. Chip Magnet is an Eau Claire, Wisconsin company, a family business. They distribute quality salsa and much more to stores in 38 states and Canada. In Nashville, Tennessee, Turnip Truck stores and Food City are the places to find Chip Magnet, or you can order online, chipmagnetsalsa.com. Chip Magnet, raise your snack standards, and a big thank you to Chip Magnet for supporting Bowling with the Fef as they have done from pretty much the very beginning. Flush in the Pocket. I think Bo has 17 titles. You could be right. I could be wrong. We can debate that one. I know he's got a lot. I thought he had 18. But either way, in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, that's a ton of titles. So congrats to EJ on hitting number 18, and congrats to you, Derek, on that Flush in the Pocket show. Got some great guests on there. A great interview with Mike Albee a few days ago. So happy to see your success there on YouTube. Well, our guest tonight is the head coach of the Tennessee Southern bowling team for now. We'll get into that as we go. You may know him as the PBA star in the 1990s, who ran the ladder at the 1996 Flagship Open in Erie, Pennsylvania, to the tune of 1,129 pins. It's a record for 4 games in a televised PBA event that still stands to this day. Bob Learn Jr. now lives in Columbia, Tennessee. You may remember Jim Cripps challenged him to come by on episode number 110, and we have Bob Learn Jr. here tonight, live on Bowling with the Fef. I should probably add him to the stream, though. That would make it easier to see him and hear him. Bob, how are you doing tonight?
Good. I thought I was going to be talking behind a picture all day. All right. Brought me in. All right.
Technical problems. They never go away. They just kind of pop up in spots where you don't know that they're coming. You have had an incredible, let's say, 24 hours here. Tennessee Southern University, a school that announced last week that they were going to discontinue their bowling program, and a few days later, your guys take the Hoosier Classic. Tell me about what it's been like for you.
Well, going into the Hoosier Classic, we were ranked #1 in the nation. So no one was more surprised than everybody involved that we were going to be not continuing our legacy next year. The kids, obviously pretty beat up about it, but I'm just been really about keeping them engaged and pushing as hard as we can to the finish line as we normally would. And this weekend, they rose to the occasion. They had won the conference championships the week before and went out and won what is really the U.S. Open for college bowling, the Hoosier.
Yeah. What a fantastic way to end the season. And against a great team, Wichita State, in the finals. For those of us who weren't there in person or didn't have a chance to see it, how did that final match go down?
Well, we ended up winning 3-1 out of best of 5. However, the matches were very close, very intense. Came down to the 10th frame each game. And, you want to bowl a team like Wichita State for a title, because you want to feel like you're competing against the best for a title, not just, running anybody. So it was a great challenge for the kids to be able to stand up to. And we had met them once earlier this year and came out on top out in Las Vegas. So we've met each other a few times, and we're hoping that there's one more in our future, and that would be for a national title.
Yeah, that's we'll find out where you go to sectionals in a couple days here, so that's got to be exciting. One of the things I noticed today is that last week in USBC Collegiate, you guys are #1 in the nation. The new rankings come out today, and Wichita State is #1. So I'm scratching my head thinking, is there a typo? Is there something that I just don't understand here? So I reached out to USBC, to Aaron Smith, and he said that although you guys did win the bracket, Wichita State qualified higher, which determines the number of ranking points in the event. And then there's also a thing in the rankings that will average out or adjust a team's results and points once they exceed 10 events in the regular season. Tennessee Southern, you'll see they have 11 tournaments for the year, 5 tier 1, 6 tier 2. And there's also a section that asks if they exceeded 10 in an adjustment that followed. Wow, that's a lot. I guess, my question to you is not, the wheres or why fours, but does the ranking matter? Does it matter that you're #1, #2, #15, whatever?
Well, psychologically, I think the team feels like they're where they want to be, and going into nationals, they deserve to be there, right? So I think from that perspective, it matters. Certainly for them to just say, hey, we bowled as a #1 team is kind of cool. But listen, we're in postseason now. It's game for anybody. We knew after qualifying, we qualified 4th. We got off to a little slow start the first game of the day on Saturday, and then we were chasing after that. So we got the 4th, and they were 2nd. So I knew that there was a possibility, because we had been so close with them all year, that they could possibly take that #1 spot. But the most important thing is when they make those selections on Wednesday and where we go for our sectionals, Smyrna, Tennessee is about 45 minutes from where we're at. Okay. And we spent a couple years going down to Dallas, and last year we haven't been in Smyrna in 5 years. Oh. And so being that you're at the top, Wichita will probably end up going to the closest location, I would think, would be Dallas, and we would be able to come back to Smyrna for a year. And that's a big thing with a program that like ours, that we have to raise money to get through a season. And so there's a big difference between having to go all the way down to Dallas or just driving 45 minutes to a stop. So it literally could save us a couple $1,000 on that pool. So we're excited to be in that position. Hopefully, bowling out of what would be our home for that event.
Yeah. Derek wants to know how you are. I think we covered that, but how are you, Bob?
You know, how well can you be when you realize something that you spent 6 years building and feeling like you're going to leave something pretty strong when you move on is no longer. I mean, that's a tough one to swallow.
Yeah.
You know what? I love what I'm doing, so I'm doing fine there. I love teaching as much as I do bowling. So I had my time on the lanes, and I've had some fun and some great moments, and it's so cool to share great moments with a college team. Seeing those kids light up yesterday, because again, for them that was a U.S. Open. We've won other tier ones, but this one is just different.
Yeah. Fran Bax, who is a previous guest, says if he were the president of that college, he says he would be busting butt to find significant funding for your program, especially after your men's team won that event, sustainability rules. And by the way, congratulations.
Thanks. So Fran's a good friend for many years. We're about an hour and a half from each other. We bowled a lot of weekend stuff going all the way back to the early 80s. So we spent many times competing against each other and mutual respect for one another. And I appreciate the fact that he feels that way, because certainly we have had that in general from many coaches. Many people have reached out and said, what and how can this possibly be? But we just became UT Southern 2 years ago. We were a private college, and we really thought, well, UT, this is going to be really a good thing for us, better funded, programs and whatnot. And there was a 24-month transition into the final, streaming everything together with our college. And they had to look at everything. They did a feasibility study. Our JV teams, which we carry quite a few, those are being phased out. We knew that was going to be happening. But we are the most expensive sport because we travel. We have no home games. We don't have a facility on site. And I think that was the big one for us. Kids travel 35 minutes up a country road to Columbia where they practice. So there's some liability there. And I think that was part of the consideration. If there was a facility on site, I think we would have been fine.
Yeah. I know you've got the postseason and all that stuff to focus on, and I'm sure you are. I got to ask the question. I mean, after this season, are you going to try and coach another college team?
Well, it's hard you start over. I mean, because it takes you about 3 years to really build, what you need to be able to be successful. Unless you're very fortunate in stepping into a program that has good players in place. So I'm gonna be 61 here in a few weeks. So how much could I put into it and grow another program? Do I feel like I could do that and be successful again? Yes, I think we have the recipe for that. But it would have to be the right place, something that really made sense, and certainly I would think location would be a big one as well. I do have a strong connection to Brunswick, and I've been talking to him a little bit about possibly being part of the team at the headquarters. So trying to figure out what's next.
Yeah. Well, whether you do or don't, you are going to be teaching some coaches how to better their coaching coming up in early next month. Why don't we talk about that a little bit? You've got the flyer that I want to put up here. This is at 10 Pin Alley in Columbia. It's the USBC Bronze Program. Tell us what all that's about and how you would become what is required to become a bronze coach besides going to this event.
Well, what would it take? You'd have to go online and do a level 1 coaching certification. And once you've completed that, you are eligible to come and take part in a bronze. You'd have to wait a whole nother year before you could upgrade to the silver. This is something I do every year since I've been in this area, and something that I was a part of back in the mid 2000s when I was at the USBC coaching department. It's one thing to help rewrite manuals and stuff that we were doing there, but it's also another one to go out and actually help other coaches become better at what they love to do.
Yeah.
So it's something it's, really right here. I feel like, I think it's important that we pass on as much information as possible. I know John Petraglia always says that, each generation in our sport should be better than the last because they've learned from the generation before. And I feel that's the same thing with coaching, is that we need to be able to take the experience that we have, pass that on, and create better coaches going forward.
Sure. Do you find that a lot of people that go through the time and effort and money that it takes to become bronze certified end up going the next step to become silver certified too?
I do. I really do. There's a lot of people that obviously have gotten involved with the high school level. And I think when you get to high school level, that a bronze is probably adequate to be, prepared for that. But if you want to go into the college sector, I think you need to be a silver. You certainly got to know a little bit more than what a bronze would offer. The rest of that, it gets much trickier to get to the gold level. A lot more time and investment, and at some point, if you really have that interest, it's there. But I see most people, if they can get to the silver, they can learn enough and be able to pass on enough information to help a lot of people.
Sure. One of your students is in the chat saying the future is bright, and I believe the best is yet to come for both Bob and bowling. That's of course Jim Cripps, the backwards bowler. You're a coach for him. How do you coach someone who bowls backwards?
Well, I'd coach myself first and making sure I'm not behind them. Right.
Right.
No, listen, first time we met was about 15 years ago. We were doing, it was kind of like a big event that ABC, before USBC, would put on to kick off the USBC or ABC tournament. And we always did trick shots and stuff like that. And we learned about Jim and what he was doing. And the fact that he was good at it was interesting enough for Dale Niemla, who was my boss at the time, to reach out to Jim and say, "Hey, we got this thing we want you to come and be part of." And so he did, and we got to do several of those together. And it didn't take long, and he was doing trick shots as well, and doing pretty good trick shots at that. So he really he has a real love for the sport. What he's doing is really not a gimmick. It's something that he did and realized that he could be good at doing it that way. And he's just recently shot a 300 game. So obviously, it's something that works for him.
Yeah. He took care of that 300 right before I had him on. So,
and I do have a couple of copies with him on the cover of Bowler's Journal. I got to get him to sign one for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, what a great picture they put on that.
That was a great pick.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get into, your bowling story. And I want to start from kind of before the bowling part, because I asked a similar question to Parker Bone III. When he comes on, I ask him about Parker Bone Sr. and Parker Bone Jr. and all that. So what can you tell us about Bob Learn Sr.?
Well, that is kind of an interesting question, because when I was a youth bowler, and I started bowling well, and my name would get into the newspaper for high scores, my name was Bob Learn, with a different middle name than my father's.
Okay.
And one week I put on a clinic in junior league, and back then scores were much different than today. And I had it was like the 11th highest score ever recorded in our association. And man, I was on cloud nine. I was working at the bowling center, working in the back. I came up on a Monday night where all my cousins bowled and my uncles bowled, and my dad was there. And I walk up and everybody's buying him a drink, congratulating him on bowling so well. And he's accepted it. He had all kinds of chips there, And I said, "Wait a second. How can this be? You're not going to tell him that was me?" So I called in scores on Sunday nights, and the next week I became Bob Learn Jr.
Aha. Okay.
And I've been carrying that alias ever since.
Fair enough. Did was he the one who kind of got you started in the
Yeah, he
sport, or was
was.
that? Yeah.
Yes. I'd go watch him on Fridays when he bowled my mom, and I love being in that environment. Honestly, not the haze of the smoke that used to be in bowling centers back then, but just the fact you saw so many people and they got together every week and enjoyed, hanging out and bowling. It was like, wow, this is a really cool social thing. And then he got me started when I was 8 years old.
Okay.
At that time, you had to wait till you were 8 because conventional wisdom was you had to be 8 years old to carry an 8-pound ball, and there wasn't no 6-pounders.
Okay.
So we were not even allowed to start until we were 8.
Ah.
And I could tell you, once I got starting in league, the only problem I had is that on Monday when I was in school, supposed to be thinking of school, I was daydreaming about Saturday bowling 3 games again.
That's great. Derek wants to know, how did you develop your style, which is a good question because I feel like your style has kind of evolved over time, right?
Yeah, I was taught like everybody else to hold the ball up, but even though there had been some really good professionals that held the ball down, and honestly, if you look at someone like a Marshall Holman, back then, he had his hand on it, but he really did hold the ball really low and just run with the ball, very much like I do. And he was the one that I really liked watching when I was younger, for how he threw the ball, and just how aggressive his game looked to me, like he was in attack mode. And I was trying to imitate him. Honestly, it felt weird with my other hand on the ball. I saw Wayne Webb was Player of the Year with one arm down, and I just came up with my own way to utilize that. It was never a problem for me to bowl that many games holding it with one hand down like that. And so I've been able to do it, and even into my being 60, and so it's something that's worked very well for me. It actually helped me become better in the modern game because when you hold the ball down like that, you have to stay ahead of the ball, and there's only one way to go, and that's fast to stay ahead of it when you're already there. So that kind of matched with my rev rate.
Yeah.
And it worked very well over the years. Definitely gave me advantage when it came to throwing the ball hard or keeping the ball online better. Maybe not so much when I had to throw it slow. But I tried to work it as much as possible. But if I can hold the ball down and I can get back and use my legs, that's when I'm in my good spot. And I've had enough of those opportunities to make it a career.
Yeah. 8 years old, you get started in it. Were there junior leagues, opportunities for competing for high school or college?
Yeah, at that time, we didn't. Well, we still don't have high school bowling in our area,
Oh,
which is really strange to me. From where I'm from, and there's a lot of great bowling in my area, and we have 4 different guys that live in my hometown that have went out and won national titles.
well,
And myself and Ron Palambi Jr., if you remember Ron Palambi,
sure
we
do.
bowled together on the same junior league team.
Oh, wow.
And then we both go out and we both won a US Open. So, that's kind of pretty cool. And you would think there would be enough interest to have high school bowling when you have that much going on in the bowling community, but never has happened. As far as college bowling, really wasn't well known back then. There were some programs, but it isn't like today where you can actually get connected to those programs.
Yeah.
When I was at Turbo, working for Turbo, helped develop the Collegiate Expo, which was just that, getting those kids at high school to be seen by college programs, not just the ones that were really good at junior gold, and trying to make that connection happen. Because I know there's a lot of kids from those smaller towns that just don't have that opportunity as much as some of the bigger cities. So something that I continue to do is reach for those little areas and pockets where people don't know these kids, and that's how I grew my program. Many coaches go, "Where did you get that player?" Because they're like, I'd never seen him before. I'm like, well, I get to do a lot of clinics, and I get to run into a lot of people doing that. So it was a great resource for recruiting. And I wish I would have had that opportunity when I was a kid.
Yeah. And I guess what I was thinking is that's got to be a great compliment too, because you found, maybe the diamond in the rough that the others just didn't either didn't find or didn't put in the work to find.
Yeah, I think I'm involved with Team USA coaching, but I never recruited anyone that was Team USA player. I really felt like my ambition was to try to take diamonds in the rough and grow them, and most of my players were just that. When we look at my team today, half of those players were JV players in their second season. By third season, they advanced to varsity. In year 4, they're some of the best in the country. So, that's what I was about, trying to grow it, not necessarily recruit it.
Yeah. So when you're coming up, you don't have these opportunities in high school and college. Tell me about what it took to get yourself ready to go out on tour.
Well, we came from a great area for bowling, much like the Wisconsin, Chicago, that area, Buffalo, New York, Erie, Pennsylvania, Rochester, New York, Syracuse, that whole area, Cleveland, a lot of good bowling going on when I was growing up, and still are great bowlers from those areas with success. There was a lot of opportunity for tournaments. I spent a lot of time in Buffalo, New York when I was young, bowling those weekends, kind of cut my teeth on that competition there. And I got very fortunate. They had this bowling show called Beat the Champ, and very well-known show in our area. And I qualified for that when I was 18, just fresh out of youth leagues. I think they had 1,100 people try out for it, and 16 made it. And I made it. And amazingly, I went on and had a really good run there. Shot a 299 and 803, which was the record on that show back when 800s were not a thing. And I picked up a sponsor and got to go out on tour. So it was really, a different way. And I guess just by chance that I was the right place, right time, doing the right thing. But it all came down to where I was from.
Yeah.
We have this thing called snow, and a lot of it. We get it by feet, not inches, and it keeps you inside doing things. And bowling's the perfect thing to be doing all winter.
Yeah, got to give it some of that snow.
I like that.
When you bring it up, because we're getting that here too. So you're going out on tour when you're what, 19?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I had a scholarship to the New York City School of Art.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about doing that. It was New York City in the early 80s was not a pretty place to be. Went over there and checked it out. And I'm like, I don't think this is where I want to be, coming from a smaller town, And as it turned out, this came up right in between when that decision was being made, and an opportunity to go out. I had a sponsor reach out to me, offer me a 3-year deal, and I was on my way.
Okay. So you head out on tour, a relatively new face, and this is the early 80s, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you in those early days? Was there success? Did you, were there trying times?
Yeah, there was trying times. One, today you have players that get to understand certain patterns, get to play on patterns. There's a lot more knowledge out there. Back then we had the guy with the spray can that did the lanes, right? Yeah. So there was no graph. There was nothing really. You bowled on it, and they would tell you if it was going to be different. When we started qualifying the first day, they called a Phantom report. That's all we knew. So, and we had, when I started, it was plastic and rubber balls. Urethane was just coming out. So it was a completely different era. But the hardest thing is, I hear a lot of people writing about the PTQs now.
Yeah. Back
then we had PTQs, and there were a lot of people that would show up for a PTQ. The toughest one was probably in Florissant, Missouri, Dick Weber's. Maybe 160 people trying out for 15, 16, 18 spots. That was difficult in itself. So it was hard to make money You were learning what was going on out on tour. Nothing like it anywhere else. You had to bowl PTQs, big fields. You felt like you won a tournament just to get in, and then the best were waiting for you in the next level, right? So, yeah, I got off to a slow start. It took me to my third year to make a TV show.
Okay.
And that was at the World Open in Chicago. And from then on, I started believing more in myself. I had time under my belt to be able to say, okay, I can do this. And I was young enough to say, and I had nothing keep me, from being out there and trying it. So I was very fortunate in a lot of ways. Like they say, it takes a village, and I had that behind me.
Yeah. Derek mentions that you shot 253 to lose to Mark Thayer in the 1992 U.S. Open. First match on TV, both using the Blue Hammer, his all-time favorite ball. He's seen these shows a couple times.
I guess he has. Yeah, that was, you go to the U.S. Open, you make the show, and you shoot 250 and lose on a U.S. Open. And then, of course, there wasn't another really big game shot any of the other matches. So that was a missed opportunity. But I had a chance just a few years later to redeem myself as leader at the U.S. Open and be able to seal the deal once, anyways.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I sent a message to Chuck Gardner and asked about your bowling. He said that he thought what made you so good during your career was your ability to make huge changes in your ball roll and your speed, axis rotation, and angles. He said your pucking it up the gutter game was really good, along with your slow wheel game. He said you were pretty solid between the ears for sure. Spare game was above average also. I mean, that sounds like the total package. I mean, he says he thinks, what made you the most special is when you could see that what you needed to do. Clearly, you could get in rhythm and stay in rhythm for long periods of time, putting up huge scores. Is this stuff that Chuck sees and you don't, or can you tell that you're becoming very versatile in those
No, I
respects?
definitely knew I had a lot of versatility. One, my rev rate was pretty high, and I was able to create a lot of shape even when balls didn't do it as much for you. Again, I had to work on the slower speed a lot, but I did. I worked hard at that. I knew that I had to be able to do that if I was going to be good enough to make a living. And back then we bowl on the same pattern that was old in the morning. We'd have 4 6-game blocks. So we'd bowl, come back, and get to bowl again. And a lot of times, like he said, you might start off being a straight player in the morning, and then at night you're playing a completely different part of the lane, doing a completely different thing. And so you had to be good at more than one thing if you wanted to have a chance to be successful, I felt.
Yeah.
You either had to be a specialist, really like one of the best at what they do, or a very unique ball roll. They gave them something different others didn't see, or you had to have a lot more tools to be able to come out on top. So yeah, I definitely felt that I was that player. I felt like I fell short when it comes to title wins, but I had a lot of title shots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ended up taking some time off of the tour in the late 80s and around 90, 91. What prompted that?
Well, right after I had made that first show, my sponsor, his wife had cancer. She was sick, and he kind of was just no longer interested in other things and what was going on with his family, and so actually it was 84. After 84, I was home, and just that time I met my still wife Stacy, and we started a family, and honestly it was the right thing at the right time.
Yeah.
I loved bowling on tour, but I was also feeling lonely, and so I came back home, started a life, and I still kept my bowling current. When the tour was within range, I would bowl those stops, and I was making shows consistently for the amount of tournaments I was bowling. I was doing okay. I was making shows, had a couple title shots in the 80s, even though I wasn't on tour.
Sure.
Then 92 came, and I went out my first event and won. And that kind of just put me in the direction of like, okay, let's try this again full time.
Yeah. In that championship match with Dave D'Entremont, you can hear both Bo Burton and Chris Schenkel saying, "This is the new Bob Learn. This is a different Bob Learn." What had changed? Were there things in your physical game that were different? Was it mental?
Well, mental, I would say, was a big part of it. That first 3 years on tour and struggling to get through the PTQs and then trying, if you did, making a check, that was always something that you always felt like you fell short. I had this opportunity, I fell short. Me and my wife was a great thing because she believed. I mean, she'd see me bowl. She goes, "How is anybody beating you? Like you're throwing the ball like this. You throw it as good as any of these guys." And started to make me believe in myself. And I started bowling a lot of weekend tournaments in the '80s and started winning quite a few. Won a lot of regionals back then. Um, and I think that that combination of all things led me to the point where I said, I am good enough. I believe I'm good enough. And I went out there with a lot more confidence.
Yeah. So you win in 92, you win again in 93, and in that 93 win, you have the opportunity to take on the king of the hill, Ron Williams. This guy was winning every king of the hill match. He was winning time after time after time until he ran into you, right?
Well, I mean, he had an unbelievable year. He was, I've never seen anything like it. We were friends even back in the early days, but when he had that year, I was like, you can't beat the guy. And I got in my match, and honestly, it was a big win. It was a big prize fund the week that I had won, and I wasn't even thinking about the other match. And here I am, like I kind of felt like if I lose this match, I'm going to walk out of the show feeling like I'm a loser after I just won, right? So I'm like, all right, we got to get our head back into the swimming pool. So yeah, go on and I win the match, and it was a big bonus week for him because they were bonusing like every third week was like an extra bonus, and I believe this was the $20,000 bonus on top of the $5,000 match. And but once the very next week, I make match play. He does too. Only he's going to the top this time. He comes back, wins the tournament, and then beats me in the next week King of the Hill match. I'm like, that's the tear he was on.
Is it strange that, at least for me, now I'm watching along every week. I can't miss a show back then. But I found his game to be very odd back then, as many people still do today. But watching the replays, it almost makes a little more sense to me now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about being a specialist.
Hmm.
His role was very different than a lot of other players. And that year, there was a lot of friction. And as far as our patterns were concerned, they were hooking quite a bit. And his role, he could keep the ball in line and he'd get that ball just to set there like better than anybody, right?
Yeah.
And it was incredible to watch him. His confidence that year was so high, and like I said, he was a friend of mine. So I was behind him. I'm like, great bowling and amazing year. It also, uh, you know, made me believe that years like that can happen,
Yeah.
right? No matter who you are, right?
Sure.
And it would be only a few years after that I would have a year that would be similar to what Ron had that year. And that's it. It's all about timing, being there at the right time when the right thing's being put out on the lanes, and you can take advantage of it. And you go at the wrong time. There's some great talented players that went out at the wrong time and did have a second chance.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to have a second chance.
Oh yeah. I've spoken with several past and present PBA guys on this show, and the one thing that I have the opportunity to bring up with you that I haven't with them is ball caddies. I talked with a gentleman named Matt Duty, who
I knew that was coming.
is
Yep.
a buddy. We bowled juniors together at the same time. So he's talking about when he was about 14 or 15. And he remembers a tournament that he believes was at the Showboat in Vegas. And he says the shot was on the gutter, and you were paired up with Norm Duke. And as a spectator, watching those two on the gutter in their prime was amazing. He says, as a caddy, getting firsthand experience sitting in the settee area watching this is absolutely priceless. So he remembers another tournament where he was with you. He said you didn't have the best ball reaction, and he didn't believe that you and your ball rep were really seeing eye to eye about equipment. And again, he's 14, 15 years old. So this AMF ball rep comes up to him with a bowling ball, a ball that you were not interested in throwing. The rep comes to him, hands him the ball, and says, "Give this to Bob." And he just walks away. He said he's sitting there unsure what to do, as he's now directly in the middle of you two. He puts the ball on the chair next to him, and you come back from your shot and say, "What's that?" And he said he didn't remember the name of the rep, but that he told you, "I was told to give you this ball." And he says you start kind of begrudgingly using it and end up salvaging a solid game, with some choice words along the way. He says it was a fun experience, and to this day, he says it was one of those moments that where you learn, and it taught him that as good as you can be physically, as good as you may be mentally, having that extra set of eyes, those ball reps out there, they're there for a reason. I'm sure in the moment you're focused on winning this thing. You're focused on knocking pins down. But having ball caddies around like Matt, I mean, what did that do for you in the heat of battle?
Well, again, you can't see everything that they can see from behind. You can only feel what you're feeling. And I don't remember that exact moment, but I was probably more focused on the fact that something physically was not right with my game. And there's many tournaments I would work during a tournament on something physical. You have enough games, you can work through it and still be successful. Having a ball caddy there and someone helping you along the way, someone to talk to, just having somebody to talk to and kind of air some of those feelings. And not only that, but you're also in a mentorship program when you have some 14 or 15-year-old with you and you want to talk to them and kind of tell them what's going on and what you're thinking. All that, it just kind of takes your mind off of some of that struggle that you're having at times, and also having somebody there to root for you when things are going well. So yeah, there's a lot of benefit to that. But I had several caddies over the years. Matt was one that showed up consistently, and I always look forward to seeing him when I was anywhere in the area. But there's this one caddy that I certainly remember him, but I didn't realize who it was. And this is about 5 years ago. I'm having dinner with somebody. He goes, "You don't remember me, do you? Being your ball caddy?" And I'm like, "Ball caddy?" He goes, "Yeah, when I was a kid, anything in New York, New Jersey, I would have my parents let me skip school. They would drive me out. I would caddy for you. I did it for like 3 or 4 years." He goes, "I caddied for you." I said, I remember that kid, but that was you? And he's like, "Yeah, that was me." I'm like, "Oh my God." I look at him like, Mike Fagan? Mike Fagan was that kid.
Wow.
Yeah, and I did not, and I bowled against him when he got older, but obviously he changed looks and all that. I just didn't, see him as the same person. We never talked about it,
Sure.
but he brought that up, and I'm like, "Oh my God." And then the thing, obviously he took enough interest in what I was doing as a player, and he's obviously a very, very versatile player himself. So,
Yeah.
maybe I could have given a few insights into the game. He did
Hey,
okay at it.
I was gonna say, between Fagan and Duty, you created some monsters. We've got some comments here. So Derek says Ron Williams had the weirdest style in the history of bowling. You could not teach his style. Maybe not, but I mean, there are other guys who have had different styles, of course. I mean, would you say his is the weirdest?
Well, I mean, there were other guys that had something similar, like Joe Hutchinson.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of had that, where he opened his arm up and had that little cocked elbow. There was others, that were different. I mean, but yeah, it certainly didn't fit the norm. But I've had the same people say that about me holding the ball down one-handed. Like, have you always done that? Why?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever works. As long as you can repeat what you're doing. But yeah, there was. Here's the thing. What I realized is not necessarily how great you physically throw it, because we had a lot of guys come out on tour like that. It was the people that believed they were the best, regardless how they threw it, because they were willing to get up there and throw it when they needed it for all it's worth. And I could probably pick out one of the guys I learned the most from in that regard was Ernie Schlegel. I never was a fan of his game per se, but he believed every time he let go of that ball, it should strike. And some of those shots coming off his hand, I'm thinking 8-10, right? But he believed it was 10 when he let go of it. I learned a lot from that, because I'm like, wait, I got much more ball, and yet there's times I doubt that it's going to strike. And this guy believes it every time. I need to work on that.
Yeah. Scott ST33 says Ron Williams and Mark Williams, no relation, different kind of ball roll. James Goodman says evening bowling with Fef and Bob Learn. Thank you for watching live, James. And he says congratulations on your tournament win.
Well, thank you. Again, I love this as much as I do bowling itself. So it gives me a second career, if you will, a second life on the lanes, and I feed off the energy these kids have, and it's exciting to see them have a day like that.
Yeah. Let's examine the 1996 Flagship Open. This is in your hometown of Erie, Pennsylvania. It's in a stadium.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Well,
my hometown?
I'll refresh your memory here. You start out with 300 against Petraglia. They stop everything. They do an interview and all that stuff, but then you have to buckle down and win 3 more matches. So what do you remember about, being able to get back into focus after that huge accomplishment?
Well, you're right. It was a long break.
Yeah.
They went to commercials. They played, we did a video the day before. I was like, I don't know, maybe 12th with 8 games to go in that tournament. And they came to my house and they did a piece on my family. Me and my son, we put on our hunting clothes. We went across the street, pretending like we were duck hunting. They had this whole video, and they decided they're going to show that after the 300. So we're watching this video, waiting for that. And then they came out with a check presentation for $100,000. So there's that, right? And by this time, I'm just like, I just won $100,000 in front of my hometown crowd. So they started back up, and I leave a ball to the pocket, and then a strike, and then another 5-10 pin. Then they go to commercial break. And my wife goes, are you here to win this tournament? I go, well, I mean, who cares almost? Like, I just want $100,000. I mean, she goes, no, you've always wanted to win a tournament in your hometown. Something you said you always dreamed about when you were a kid, even before there was such a tournament. She goes, get your head back together and figure out what you got to do, and let's see if we can win this thing. Yeah. And so I'm at commercial break, and I look, because I had 4 bowling balls that Dale Warren was my ball rep at that time, laid out for me. The first one was my 300. I hadn't thrown it all week. And I was thinking about my ball reaction of flat 10s. I'm like, the ball's actually too strong. I'm going to grab a different one. I grabbed one that had a little weaker pin placement, and I finished the game out with the last 9 to win by a pin, having changed balls after that break. So her encouragement at that time, when I was thinking, it can't get any better, and who cares, because it was, a dream come true just doing that.
Yeah.
Made me change balls. And then that went on to allow me to go to the finish line.
Sure. Scott Straub says Scott Deaver's style was crazy. That was definitely a figure 8.
There's one. Yep, there's one.
There's one.
But what a great, accurate player he was.
Oh, yeah.
So deceiving. Another one that believed that when he let go of it, even though he didn't have the strongest ball, he believed he was going to strike.
Oh, yeah.
Great player. Great mental player.
Sure. James says he bowled the 59th Erie Times New Open. Times News Open last year, finished 20th out of 168. And Mike Shady, won it. So
Mike Shady wins a lot of stuff back.
He does win a lot of stuff. Yeah. He says the title match this year was Machuga and Shady in the 60th Times News Open. So definitely some star power there in that.
Yeah, event. we have a lot of good players from my hometown. A lot.
Yeah.
Those are just to name a few.
Right. So back in '96 in the Flagship Open, your semifinal match is against Parker Bone III, and you missed a 10-pin, but it came out that this woman had stood up just past the foul line, right in the middle of your approach. They give Parker the decision: do you let him do it over or not? Because those were the rules at the time. I actually talked with him about it when he was on last year in episode 51. Here's what he said.
Yes, I would give him the shot over. Yes, he would make the spare. I would lose 280 to 279. He still had to go out and earn it.
Yeah. Wow.
I would do the same call again if I had to that I did then. And I know I'm the one that lost at that moment in time, but it was totally the right thing to do for the circumstances at hand.
What do you think? I mean, all these years later, he does not second guess that decision.
Well, back then we had a rule that if there was something that was clearly an interference, albeit one of our banners fell, as you're heading to the foul line to throw a shot, something that clearly happened that would interfere with your shot, you could get it over. That was definitely a rule that we had in place. This was the first tournament they ever had people sitting along the side of the lanes. Yeah. It actually was a man that did it. Oh. And I didn't find out who it was until the next year. We went to the Korea Cup in Seoul, Korea. And this guy came up and he was laughing about it. You remember me? And he's like laughing about it. I'm like, what? He goes, I was me. I stood up and made you miss the 10-pin. I'm like, you're laughing about this? You almost ruined the best day of my life. But yeah, he literally couldn't see the 10-pin because I asked him why he did it. I couldn't see the 10-pin. So I stood up to take a look and I didn't realize that, it was going to interfere with, I'm like, right in the middle of my approach, he did that. He could have literally just went out and, put his hand and touched the ball for as close as he was. So it was a clear interference. They didn't catch it on camera for what it was, but stood up, leaned over, everything. On my way up and of course I flinched just enough to just miss. And yeah, he actually wasn't even asked. He just said, Johnny, he gets that shot over. And Johnny asked, are you sure? He goes, yeah. I mean, look, the guy stood right up on him. So all I did was I was in I couldn't believe the guy did it. I was just kind of holding my head going, what just happened? And before I even got off the approach, he had already made that call.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it certainly changed the course of history as far as scoring, record on TV. But would I have made that same call for him? Absolutely.
Yeah. Scott wants to know if there are any stories with Ron Palumbi Jr., which is a great question because the first telecast I ever saw was in 1986, and it was Kessler Classic, Ron Palumbi Jr. versus Dave Husted. And Husted ended up winning, but Palumbi was just starting to kind of get going back then. So he's got kind of a special place in my recall of the PBA. But how about you? You mentioned that you guys grew up together, you bowled in leagues and stuff like that.
Well, we start, when we were in junior leagues, we practiced afterwards together. We worked on our game, if you will, together. And we were very supportive of one another. But as things normally work out, for a while became so competitive because everybody would always compare us on how well we were doing when we got out there. And those are years when he had his most success. I really wasn't out on tour at that time, but they knew that I had gone out there a few years and had only made one TV show or whatever. I was young, but there was always that comparison. So without even us being involved with, one another having this competitive thing, people made it competitive, and so That's the one thing I wish wouldn't have happened. I felt like if we could have been there for each other a little bit more, like just, I think that would have been good for both of us. And I think, we're in that place now, but we were very competitive because other people made it competitive for us.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can say about that. I just reached out to him a couple of days ago. So it's not like, we have this relationship. We grew up at the same time. We had the same dream. We lived the same dream. And we're both on the outside looking in at the PBA Hall of Fame because we're both like this short based off of what they're looking at. So, that was really the conversation we had. But,
Sure.
just one more win here, one more, just because the Hall of Fame's coming up. A good friend of mine is going in this year, Lenny Borsch. We bowled together in the USBCs. We traveled together on the senior tour. So happy for him. We had those conversations when he won that, he was now eligible. And sure enough, he's going in this year. For kudos to him. It's going to be a great day for him to be able to see that. We traveled even back in the day in the 80s, him, Gushineris. We kind of hung out on the tour back in the early 80s together. So we've known each other that long.
Yeah. Stephen F says, I think he also said at some point that Parker's mom would not give it over. The shot I'm guessing he's talking about in 96.
Well, she was Parker's biggest fan, right? So if Parker didn't win, she was all about, her son being at the top. And of course she got to live that because he was at the top a lot.
Yeah.
But I think she was just as competitive as he or I were, so yeah, I would say you're probably right. She probably said, oh no, you're taking that. You're taking that mission. You're going to beat this guy.
You talked about 96, that Flagship Open being the best day of your life. So it's that over the 99 US Open where you defeated Jason Couch for the title?
Most important title is the US Open.
Okay.
The greatest day of my life is to be in front of 4,500 people in my hometown. A quarter of them I knew by name. Having my family there. One of the great things about that today is looking back into that crowd and seeing people that are no longer with us, that were big supporters of mine, that were a part of my growth and my opportunities back then. That's what I see in that now. But back then, realized I had that many people cheering me on, and being able to perform in front of my hometown crowd. And then to have a day like that, how could that not be your best memory of bowling on tour?
Sure.
Yeah. I couldn't, even in my dreams, I would put a few more spares in just to be realistic.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I lived out the greatest day in bowling that I could even imagine.
Yeah. How long did your run on tour go after that US Open win?
Well, I would say my final year was the 2005, and that win was 1999. I went on to win a Japan Cup in 2001. The new PBA had come in and changed where they took away all qualifying games, and it became just matches. And for whatever reason, I had bowled the entire season and was always around that number of being exempt or not exempt. Second highest average on tour, and I was right at the bubble line. And when I realized that was happening, I'm like, there's something really wrong with this, because I was always about or trained on the fact knocking down more pins matters. And then it came down to, well, if you win your match, you move on. Kind of like what people see in the Masters. They realize they got a chance because anything can happen in those matches versus if you have to beat everybody by pinfall, it's much more difficult. Yeah. So when it turned to that, I realized, hey, this is it. This is the end. We're done. I cannot predict, the outcome here.
Sure.
So, but
yeah, but you ended up having a nice run on the PBA 50 tour. You get 3 championships, the last being a doubles title in 2015 with DJ Archer. I talked with Del Warren about winning, on tour, and he talked about how his doubles title was the best one because he gets to win with his partner. Was it like that for you on the 50? Was that?
No, I can tell you this. I always enjoyed. We used to have a doubles tournament every year in Las Vegas at the Showboat. That was the most fun that you could have, is bowling with someone else, because it was such a, you're always for yourself, I guess, for most of the time you're on the lanes, right? It's just you and the pins. And to be able to share that and have an opportunity, we had the merit doubles, which would be a pairing of the top 16 players with the top 16 women pros for the year, and we'd match up accordingly and bowl a tournament in Vegas right before Christmas. Those were a lot of fun. One, we got to interact with the ladies and bowl with the ladies tour and had some great partners in that. And then over the years, I had some great partners on the PBA tour. And yeah, I mean, it was really enjoyable, something you get to do together. And today, my favorite thing is doing team event stuff. The USBCs, I enjoy that, and being able to share the lanes with others. For so many years, I was relegated to be an individual on the lanes, even though in my heart, I'm a team player.
Yeah. When when I talked to Chuck about your coaching, he said that he thinks that you learned a lot over your career and took much of that and created your own version of how to share that with others. He says you've done clinics all around the world with many great players and coaches. To him, he says, when we do clinics, we also learn as much as we teach. Do you find that yourself as well?
Yeah. Well, there's always something special in some player that you're going to have to deal with, and you so want to help every person. And, another way to say something that, like, oh, you got that because I said it this way, or, I heard another coach say something this way. So, okay, I'm saving that one. That goes into the bucket, right? And I really had an opportunity when I was at USBC coaching with Rod Ross and the whole entire team there, to learn. We learned from each other, and I had a lot of those moments where I was going, okay, that little nugget's gonna stay with me. Every single clinic, you pick something up. It's never just like bowling. You never arrive. There's always something more there, right? All this time with my college kids, having 4 years to work with somebody, I mean, there's no other place like that. A lot of the clinics, you're there for 7 hours and doing a clinic. You might see them the next year you come back, but it's enough time to be able to give them guidance, set them on their path. They can send you some videos you can kind of keep up with how they're doing, but nothing like 4 years, right? So a lot of time on the lanes with my kids here in the college program, a lot of learning. And I do feel like each year that I've just become a better coach each year because I'm still open to learning. I'm not professing I know everything, but I like sharing what I do know.
Yeah.
It's really good to keep it to yourself.
And the people who receive that knowledge certainly remember. Steven said that, Bob did a great clinic a few years ago that he attended at Astoria? Yeah, Astoria Bowl. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, right by LaGuardia.
Yeah.
I think I probably did that with Anthony. I'm sure he remembers that. Anthony Pepe probably was with me on that one. I do a lot of events with the young tour guys. I just did one with Kyle, EJ. I do with the ladies tour as well. There are a number of players that have an interest in coaching. And even when I was at Turbo, I certified a lot of players that were on our staff that European players and whatnot, put on classes for them. When I was at USBC, I took my budget and we, along with it was myself and Rod Ross, we took over 50 touring players to the silver level. Wow. So my whole thing is, to be able to help people become better coaches, because I know that matters. If they get in front of somebody, it can help them. Or if they have a keen interest in going out and spreading the word like I do, that it makes bowling a better place.
Sure. And Steven says correct. Anthony Pepe was there, so you were right on with that one. When it comes to the big picture now, I mean, goals change, right? You have, I'm sure you have a different goal when you're a touring player versus being a 50 player versus being a coach. But for you, given all the circumstances that, are kind of upon you right now, what's the goal? What do what keeps you driven and moving forward at this moment? Is it the national championship? Is it more?
100%. I mean, we had a goal 4 years ago with these same kids. We talked about winning a national championship while we're here, so that hasn't changed. We can't change what happens next year. Just like if you're in the third frame and you're looking at the leaderboard and worried about what's going on up there, you can only take one frame at a time and give it all you got, give it your best effort. And, personally, I'm trained like that. Stay in the process, keep working. So there's never time to back down. And we are not in a position now to back down. We're going to drive as hard as we can to the finish line. And I think the mentality of the kids that I'm with that are on my team, I think they're all on board with that.
Yeah, that's a great attitude to have. Scott asks about other coaching opportunities. Scott, if you go back, we actually discussed that right at the beginning. Check it out on replay anytime at this same link. Bob, we go off the sheet on this show by asking you to challenge somebody else. And it could be any skill level, just, someone who's passionate about the sport, has a unique story to tell, to be on a future episode. So I'll put it to you like that. Bob Learn Jr., who would you like to challenge to be on a future episode of Bowling with the Fed?
Well, I think, I don't know how many people you've had international on your show, but I think Dom Barrett would be a really good guy to have on, or AKA Domsy. Yeah, you got to call him Domsy.
Domsy? Okay.
Yeah, I gave him that moniker, and so he lives with it today.
Okay.
And
Dom, of course, one of the most recent Triple Crown winners, an insanely successful career on the tour that is still going on as we speak. So, Dom, if you happen to see this, you can find me at bowlingwiththefef@yahoo.com via email or on Facebook. I want to get you one more before we go. Because Duty wanted to make sure that I ask you about your ventures into vineyards.
Ventures into vineyards, huh? Well, listen, I mean, there's nothing like a fine glass of wine if you can get one. And, on the senior tour, the nice thing about the senior tour is we always had to stop out in Brentwood, California. And it would only be an hour to Napa. And so that was my wife and I's trip to Napa, paid for by bowling. So yeah, it's something that I've always enjoyed, fine food and wine. When we travel, you have the opportunity to experience so many good things with different regions and their food. And of course, when you get out to California or over in Europe, there's places, obviously the wine is great and you want to partake in that. Always had that love for good food and wine, and so does my wife. And so I do know this, that if I give her an extra glass of wine, it's never a bad thing.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we'll kind of end on there. We don't have a show next week. We'll be back in the first full week of March to share another interesting bowling story with you all. Bob, if people are interested in checking out that clinic, what do they do? Where do they go?
You go on to bowl.com coaching, and they will have all the information you need. If there is information for coaching at bowl.com, that will give you all the resources you need and the people that you need to talk to if you have questions.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Bob, it has been a pleasure getting to know you and your bowling story. Continued success both on the lanes and certainly at the helm of Tennessee Southern as you go for that national title.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.
You bet. And thank all of you for watching. Surely appreciate it. Until next time, be just and fear not. Have a great night.